Welcome to Unmasking Social, where we talk about building real friendships and meaningful connections without masking who we truly are. I'm your host, Sharon Baum, a speech and language pathologist with an expertise in social thinking and how it relates to autism and ADHD, specifically with our teens and tweens. Let's dive in.
Go, do it, done. Not so simple. In today's episode, we take a deep dive into what it means to actually get a task done. In a world of digital divides, in a world where screen time can really affect our attention, we explore how it is that we can go from planning to do to visualizing and then completing. This episode is so critical for our autistic teens and tweens who, on top of everything else, are struggling to get themselves to complete mundane tasks.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Unmasking Social. Today, we have a wonderful guest who specializes in executive functioning skills and is also a fellow speech and language pathologist. I am honored to have Sarah Ward on the podcast. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I so appreciate the invite, and I'm just psyched to hang out with you and chat all things executive function.
Great. Also love the green color. It's green is actually my favorite color, by the way.
Green screen, right out of the studio in Massachusetts here. We'll just keep it as it is.
Amazing. I love it. And I'm sure everybody who watches this and isn't just listening to the recording will love the green screen. So, Sarah, fellow speech pathologist, you have become a really large name in our field because of your specialty in executive functioning. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey of becoming a speech pathologist and then developing this expertise in executive functioning, even developing a very specific curriculum to help our autistic teens and tweens and neurodivergent children?
You bet. Absolutely. So my initial work when I finished grad school was I worked at Massachusetts General Hospital on the inpatient and outpatient traumatic brain injury unit. And my job was really to provide rehabilitation and evaluation for individuals who had sustained brain trauma. And, anything from car accidents to bicycle accidents, you name it. Loved my job. And then I also have a daughter who has ADHD and is very dyslexic. And she had a lot of executive function-based challenges, some very kind of explosive behaviors when she was little. And it was because she had lagging development of executive function skills. So at the same time that was happening, my husband was riding his bicycle, got hit by an 18-wheel Mack truck and was thrown 45 feet and cracked his skull open and was a patient at Mass General and was in a coma for 8 weeks and came out of coma. And all of a sudden, I was in this situation where I have a husband who's lost his executive function skills and a daughter who's not developing her executive function skills. And even though I knew what executive function was, I diagnosed it, I was, working with clients. I think the reality of living with such executive function deficit really took me down the path of, well, then how do you actually either redevelop or develop these skills? And what are the practical strategies that really make it happen, not just compensate for it? And it used to make me nuts. I'd go to professional development and they would spend all this time telling me what executive function was and nothing about what to do about it. And so those collective experiences were really my foray into how do we actually develop the brain's ability to execute a task.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being vulnerable, both about your daughter and your husband. And again, your daughter, did she show early signs of ADHD, or was it the expert that you are that had a gut instinct that, wait, something's off here?
Yeah, she definitely showed a lot of early signs of it. She would get very easily frustrated when things were unexpected, when they didn't go her way. It was hard for her to be a little bit flexible. If something was disappointing, she felt it really big. And she clearly described it was nothing short of torture sitting in a classroom and having to sit still and listen. That was really hard for her. And it's fascinating because my daughter is now almost 27. So it's been quite a long time. And we still see all of those sides. I've watched her change from being a young student to a teenager in high school and getting through college and now being a young adult. And my son is also a young adult now. And it changes, but you can still really see that inattentiveness and those executive function-based challenges present. And she needs to really use all of her strategies and tools that she has to be able to get through the day, minimize procrastination, not just jump in when something is new and shiny and exciting, and to engage.
And so I'm so curious. So now you have two adults really living with you, even though you don't look like you have a 27-year-old. So kudos to whatever skincare routine you're using. But wow, that must have been a really hard time just going back to your husband who ended up in a coma for 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. And you said that basically lost all of his executive functioning skills.
Right.
From I don't want to assume anything, but it sounds like it was difficult for him to plan, to think through things, to problem solve.
Memory, very tough.
And so was he able to rehabilitate, or was there anything that supported him through that time other than you?
Yeah. So
of course,
yes.
Yeah, you were a big rock, but
I think one thing that is kind of interesting is that there was a big difference pre-iPhone and post-iPhone, because iPhone really allowed him to be able to carry contact information and notes and reminders in his pocket. And I think that made a big difference. And memory continues to be particularly a challenge as it relates to executive function and the ability to shift your attention. So if he has something on mind and he shifts his attention to something different, that new thing interferes with whatever memory he was laying down and he will forget. So it's the classic example of going to the store to pick up dog food, favorite song comes on the radio, may attend to that, goes to the store, comes back, where's the dog food? Oh, right, I forgot. And you can say, okay, well, put it on a list, but you have to remember to look at the list. And, so all of those pieces, of course, we have the joke of where he may look and say, is that a new dress? This? No, I've had ever.
It's a nice compliment, though. I mean, it looks like he's observing at least, right?
Yeah,
right. Almost
totally.
A compliment. Nice dress. Yeah. But so it's interesting. So these executive functioning deficits tend to linger, and people forget sometimes, I find, that even though someone has developed strategies to support a la Sarah Ward and a la your curriculum, which we're going to speak to, it's still something that's always going to be a work in progress, because it's still something that you have to remind yourself of, even with the many Post-it notes and things like that. And then we add in this layer of individuals with autism, right? And so they suffer very often. I mean, I've never met somebody actually autistic that didn't have executive functioning challenges. And very often there's that co-occurrence of ADHD simultaneously, which usually does produce executive functioning challenges. It's one of the core symptoms. So can you shed light a little bit on any specific strategies that you have found successful through your own curriculum for these individuals and their families who are working through social and executive functioning at the same time?
You bet. So I think it might be helpful to dial back a little bit and kind of describe really what that skill of executive function is, and then how it might present a little bit in an individual who's autistic, and then kind of what some of those practical strategies are. I do find that in the field, kind of the most common simplistic definition is executive function is the ability to just get stuff done. Which is true. I mean, it is your ability to get stuff done. It's being able to get your homework done. It's being able to get stuff done, pack up and get out the door to go to a theater rehearsal. It's your ability to get the dog fed, to take care of the neighbor's house if you've agreed to do that for a chore, etc. So it's, even for us as adults, it's to get stuff done, write the report as it would be. But I think that in some ways that's a bit simplistic. So there's the next part of, then executive function is a planning and an organization skill. Let me organize and plan what I need to do to get stuff done. But I can tell you how many times I've seen people who have a bang up plan. They have written down a to-do list, or they've written out a schedule, but they really can't go from intention to action. And they may know what they need to do, but they can't do what they know. And so the question then becomes is where's the fallout between that? So really what executive function is executive function, particularly with our curriculum, we really describe begins with mental visualization and the ability to run a movie in your mind or a simulation of what a task is going to look like when it's done and the action and the steps you're going to take to be able to complete that task, and visualizing that within a context or a situation. So, for example, if I need to be out the door to go to school, I have to be able to maybe visualize myself walking to the bus and seeing what it is that looks like, incorporating, ooh, it's raining this morning and I do have to walk to the bus. I also know maybe what I'm visualizing I'm going to be doing in school today. So I've got awareness of that future situation. And then I have to visualize what specifically I would look like. So maybe I'm going to have my raincoat. Maybe I want to wear a baseball hat. I've got an umbrella. Maybe that's going to make me imagine that I'm going to wear my rain boots. And because I'm going to school and I'm visualizing I have a particular assignment to turn in, that I've got my backpack. And it is a simulation of, one, what it is that I look like. But it's not even enough to just picture, ooh, I'm ready to go to school in the rain. I then need to be able to simulate how I'm moving through space and time to accomplish that goal. So I have to be able to see myself going from where I'm sitting at the table eating breakfast, walking up into my bedroom, going into my bedroom, changing my clothes, taking my homework, putting it in my backpack, going into the bathroom, brushing my teeth, walking back down the stairs to the mudroom where I see that raincoat and, boots, whatever it is, and out the door. And seeing myself moving through those spaces, I can get a feel for how long that's going to take and see if it's going to fit into the amount of time that I have to get ready to inform the pace that I need to keep. So that mental movie is what really allows us to engage in effective task execution. And it's fascinating how many times I'll talk with a student and I'll say, okay, you're downstairs, you're eating breakfast, and your parent adult says, time for school, go upstairs, get your backpack and go into your bathroom and brush your teeth. I will say to that student, even though you're downstairs and you're eating, do you see yourself in your bedroom? Do you see yourself in your bathroom? The number of students are like, no. They don't have that movie in their head. And so it doesn't exist as that imagination of what is it that I need to do to be able to see myself moving through space and time. And it's funny because as we're talking about young adults, I'll just tell you a quick little story. I was working with a young adult and really, unbelievable intelligence, was working in a very high level job in New York City. Incredible that this individual had this position and yet had very poor executive functioning. So I said to him, okay, so we're meeting and our meeting is going to end at noon. And what is your next obligation? He's like, I just got a meeting at 1. And I said, okay, so that means when you hang up with me, you'll probably take a moment to check your emails, your social media, just kind of like check in with what you've missed during the course of our meeting. You'll likely need to go to the bathroom because we've been talking for over an hour. You'll need to come back to your desk, grab a bite to eat, pack up all your belongings, go all the way down the elevator of the skyscraper into the parking garage to find your car, or you're going to have to call an Uber, wait for the Uber, drive all the way across New York town to either that skyscraper's parking garage or be dropped off, go all the way back up the elevator, probably go to the bathroom again, then check in with the group where you're meeting and have time to be then escorted to the conference room to be on time for your meeting at 1:00.
I'm getting anxiety right now.
I can't even tell you, his face like pale, and he looked at me and he goes, I didn't think about any of that. And he's like, I was just going to leave here. It's like, he's like at like 10:01. There was and this is why he's chronically 20 to 25 minutes late for everything, because there's no vision. It's literally like, okay, well, this meeting's ends and that meeting's at 1 and it's 10 minutes away, but it's not 10 minutes away. So I think that is where the biggest glitch comes with executive functioning is it's not just about the plan. I have a meeting at 12, I have a meeting at 1, whatever it is. It's really about the simulation of how you're going to get from point A to point B to get it done.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I feel like that visual imagery is so critical. And it's not something as an SLP that I was really taught about. I remember being in my second year as a speech pathologist in a collaborative program for individuals with autism and social communication and executive functioning challenges. And that visual imagery wasn't something that we were actively using. And I found that there were a lot of stumbling blocks. I had students who were having trouble following directions, speaking about speech and language, in addition to everything else. And this visual imagery takes kind of the burden away of the sequencing of, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And so they were having trouble even getting from point A to point B because they weren't necessarily using the visual imagery. They were just trying to script the directions of what they're going to do. And then after the third direction, I always found it was it. Like, even if I had my whiteboard, we would use our little whiteboards and step 1, step 2, step 3, that was it. They couldn't go any further. So I'm wondering, when we're doing this visual imagery, which I can definitely benefit from, because what you said about time is so relevant, and I actually relate to it, which is, oh, well, if this is at this time, right, then my day's covered. I'm good because that isn't until then. But what about all the things that go into it? So is there a certain limit to this visual imagery, thinking back to the students that I work with and how much they can hold at one time in terms of imagining all these different things? I know everybody's different, but I don't know, I just noticed a trend to shut off after 3.
Yeah. So I think there's a whole lot of really great stuff to unpack there. So one thing about directions exactly we see is that a student can be given a direction, get your whiteboard, your homework, and a dry erase marker and sit at the desk. But if all I do is repeat that direction, then I'm kind of scripting the steps. I'm not actually simulating myself moving through space and time to carry out the steps of those directions. Because what the teacher really wants you to do is visualize, well, I'm going to go to my cubby over there and I'm going to get my homework because that's closest to me. Then I'm going to go to the material zone and get my whiteboard and my marker, and then I'll go back to my desk. And you need to be able to simulate seeing yourself moving through those spaces and identifying in your mind's eye the most efficient mode of navigation. Sometimes we find students will be really inefficient. They'll go feed the fish, and then they walk to the other side of the room, and then they come there. And all of a sudden, the transition that should take a short little quick period of time becomes a long, drawn out kind of process. So one aspect of that is that when we know that cognition is embodied, our body, we can pre-feel our body moving through space and time. So one thing that can be a very powerful strategy is to actually have your students do what we call mime or gesture and literally point out their plan. So instead of saying to a student, tell me what you need to do, I could tell you, I need my homework, my whiteboard, and my marker. I'm just using verbal rehearsal. The best trick that you can use is to change it and to say, show me your plan. Show me what you need to do. Because the minute I say, show me, show is a motor word. It requires motor activity. I can literally show you, well, I'm going to go to the, those of you that are listening, not watching, I'm pointing. I'm going to go to the cubby where my homework is. I'm pointing to my cubby. Then I'm going to go over to the material zone. I point there where I'm going to get a whiteboard and a marker. And then I point over to my desk and I'm going to sit at my desk. And by doing that, I'm now seeing myself moving through space and time. And think about it, as adults, we do this all the time. Oh my gosh, I need to run upstairs, and I might move my hand to run upstairs, and I need to quickly brush my teeth. Then I've got to go down to my office, and I gesture down to my office. I've got to quickly grab that file and then get out the door. And I would whip my hand, like get out the door, because that whipping motion and pointing is allowing me to pre-feel the emotion of, I got to get out the door fast. So gesture really allows us not only to feel ourselves, but even physically and emotionally feel ourselves moving through space. So that's like a quick trick. And then, since we're unpacking a lot, not to be too verbose, but the other really key aspect of this is that, again, executive function is heavily rooted in situational awareness, where I'm in one space and I need to be able to visualize myself in a future space at a future time. which means I need to be able to conjure up and pull up the image of a space that I am not currently in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating from two perspectives. One being that sometimes students that are autistic, they really don't visualize a space unless they're actually in that space. And so when you say to them, okay, for example, for some students, if I say, okay, we're going to go to a new restaurant tonight, they may say, no, I only want to go to IHOP because I only eat pancakes. Okay, but this is a really cool restaurant. We're going to try this. But they may not be able to pull up an image of what that restaurant looks like. And you and I, even if I've never been to that Mexican restaurant, it's a novel experience, I can pull up a visual of the schema of restaurant, and I can superimpose what I suspect a Mexican restaurant will look like based upon experiences. Sometimes that episodic memory in that schema is more challenging for individuals to pull up. And so that's why novelty can feel uncomfortable. And the second part of that is that distance in the future that you can see. What will I look like tonight? What will I look like tomorrow? What do I see tomorrow afternoon? What's coming up this weekend? That's referred to as the time horizon. And that is very typically, it's been researched and proven to show to be developmentally delayed in individuals with ADHD. So that's why we sort of say sometimes individuals with ADHD think now and not now.
Right. Yeah. I think I heard that before, right? Like it's either happening or it's just simply not. And you touched upon a few really fascinating things. One is show me. Even the art of just show me what your plan is instead of the old school, let's write this down and collaborate together, which does have a purpose, but the show me part, the visual imagery can be really helpful. You touched upon the concept of our autistic teens and tweens that don't have that episodic memory, which for all those who are listening and don't know what that is, that's the ability to understand one situation being different from a situation that you experienced before, and that the outcome will still be the same if you do the same action. I'm probably not explaining it as well as you, Sarah, but essentially it's really memory from one episode. So for example, you may be in a restaurant like you would describe prior, and you now think that and you may even be in the same restaurant again. It may not even be a different restaurant. And each time you go to this restaurant, you have a difficult situation because whenever the waiter comes over, one of your triggers is that the waiter doesn't necessarily ask you first what you want. And, they typically just ask your parents what they want. And so your reaction each time is to maybe, I'm just giving an example of a kid that I had recently, but is to basically say, wait a second, what's going on here? I don't want to eat. I'm done eating. So, and then this is where we SLPs kind of have to, I think, marry the executive functioning with the social, it sounds like, because now this individual is really upset. And then we have to speak through that in our session and I guess take the visual imagery into it and say, let's think about what happened. Let's visualize what happened. This has happened already maybe 5 times where every time you're at the restaurant, you want to have a pleasant experience, right? You want everybody to engage. You want to eat. You like to eat food. You're a foodie, but it shuts down at the point that the waiter each time just doesn't ask you. So you're getting the same outcome each time because you forget because of the episodic memory, which is different than working memory. However, it sounds like to me, Sarah, that if we can take the visual imagery of what occurred in that episode and then kind of, I'm closing my eyes because I'm trying to visualize myself and then say, well, show me what happened. And now show me what our plan is going to be in terms of the restaurant, in terms of the events. Is this something that can be married?
Absolutely. Because you did describe it. If you think about just the word episode, if I said, well, what was on last night's episode of whatever show you watch? It's fascinating. You would most likely tell me about, the episode was about so-and-so, name the character, and they were you would name the place, and then you would talk about the action of what was going on. And situational awareness is what we call the acronym STOP and read the room. And STOP stands for the 4 features of situational awareness, which are space, time, objects, and people. So at any moment in time, I'm aware of the space. What space am I in? What's happening in this moment in time? What objects or materials do I need? And who is with me? But even more importantly is, what is their role or job? So for example, right now, you're being the interviewer and I'm being the speaker, and each of us will have a specific role. So as part of your role as being the interviewer is to ask the questions, and my job is to answer the questions. So it kind of directs what expected behavior is in a given situation. So if you think about that, we know that now not only do we have episodic memory for past experiences, space, where was I, what was happening in that time, what objects were there, who was I with, and what was going on, but we also have future episodic memory, which is where we can run a simulation of a future episode. So if I'm going to be going to that restaurant, I would want to be able to say, okay, space, let's picture the restaurant and let's visualize the zones of the restaurant. There's the waiting zone where you wait to be seated. There's the table zone. And even at the table, there's the condiment zone. And we can even talk about the menu and the zones of the menu. There's the appetizer zone, the entree zone, drink and dessert zone. And we love to use that word zones because it helps us think in an organized way. We could talk about the typical times, what usually happens in a moment in time. You wait to be seated, you browse the menu, and then the waiter comes over. And what usually happens? They ask if they can take your drink order. We can almost guarantee that that's what we anticipate. If that's where the glitch is for your student, then maybe that's where we simulate how we would like that to go and what they can do to ensure it goes a particular way. And really identifying even sort of jobs and agency that, you know, at that point, their job is to be a diner, if you put it in that phrase of that job. And then there's a server. So identifying what the language looks like with each of those roles. Because interestingly, one thing to identify is if you look at this student's role at a restaurant, they are the child. Even if they're a teen, they're still considered younger to their parents who are their adults.
Right.
And in typical social conventions, it is considered polite and appropriate. And I mean, I hate to be sexist here, but
it's okay.
I think
judgment-free zone here.
Yeah, I mean, but I think typically, you know, there's a certain etiquette where you might ask the eldest female at the table what their order is first, and then you might ask the next lady, and then you might ask the gentleman, and then you would ask the kids. I think that there is something old school about that is conventional. And that may help that student of yours understand why does the server act in a certain situation the way that they do.
This is why I love having an SLP who's specializing in executive functioning, because what you're laying out is the ability to simultaneously bridge the executive functioning gap with social language. And speaking of social language, now there's another piece of this episode, and this ties into technology, which you touched upon briefly, which your curriculum targets. And I'm sure every curriculum these days is trying to figure out how to target and balance this huge piece where today's teens and adults, because the doom scrolling phenomenon affects everybody. I'm not going to mention any names of friends and family members who sometimes are doom scrolling while I'm speaking to them. And multitasking is great, but it could be tough. But growing up in this world where TikTok is still there, even though I think it was banned at one point, but it's still there as far as I understand. Instagram, Facebook, everything like that. Just this phone that's right here. I'm not looking at it because I know that my role is host and your role is listener and a speaker, sorry. And I know I'm not supposed to use the phone while I'm here, right? That's part of our social thinking situation. But this phone has a lot of good on it. But we're living in a world where so many people and even family members and others are struggling with their executive functioning skills while trying to balance screen time in a useful way. So, Sarah, how do we do this? Because pros and cons. We still need it. How are we supposed to do this, especially for the neurodivergent teens and tweens who are interested? We want them to still use it as a social avenue.
Yeah, it is very tricky, and it impacts sustained attention significantly. There was a very incredibly compelling research done by Gloria Marks from, I believe, University of California, Irvine, that they did research that in 2010, they found that the average duration of sustained attention of children and adults was 2.5 minutes per year of age with an upper limit of 5.
Wow.
So that means like
nobody's listening anymore. That means to this podcast right now.
Well, so your average, no, but interesting, your average 10-year-old then has a 20 to 30 minute attention span in 2010. So your average, if it's 2.5 minutes per year of age, your average 15-year-old has about a 30-minute attention span. Then they continued to repeat the research, and they've repeated it over 4 different times. And the latest one in 2023, the average duration of sustained attention had dropped from 2.5 minutes per year of age to 8 to 10 seconds per year of age.
Oh, dear.
That means your average 10-year-old has an 80-second attention span. Your average 18-year-old has a 180-minute or 180-second or 3-minute sustained attention span. So this is very concerning. And we also know that when that device is giving you imagery, you're not really creating imagery on your own. You're relying on that. So here's the thing. I just find that the most powerful way to kind of begin to shift a little bit, especially when you're talking about teens and tweens, is that go back to the definition of executive function as the ability to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
So many times I see that when we support students with homework or they're sitting down to do something, we say, okay, it's 3:00. What are you going to do? And they say, I'm doing my science. I'm going to do my math. I'm going to do my chores, whatever it is. I'm going to feed the dog. I'm going to mow the lawn. The problem with that is that is very actually open-ended, and it doesn't actually give you a finality of what, if you got stuff done, what done really looks like. So it's more powerful if a student's working at 3:00 to say, okay, what's the time that you've given yourself to work? Well, I'm going to work from 3 until 3:45. Okay, great. If you're done with the work at 3:45, what does done look like? What do I see in front of you? Math. Well, that's not done. It's that you've answered 12 questions, or I've done 3 problem sets, or for reading, I don't want that student to say, well, I have English. That's not what done looks like. Well, if I've been working from 3 to 3:45, done is that I've read 5 pages in my book and answered 2 open response questions, whatever it is. If you know that that's what you've accomplished at the end of that time, that helps you to regulate and realize, oh my gosh, I've been doom scrolling and I've read 0 pages. But if you are just like, I'm doing English and you're doom scrolling, there's nothing to compare your distraction and action against inaction for what you're trying to accomplish. So even as an adult, that's a big difference for yourself. If you sit down, for example, this morning, I had an open chunk of time because this morning to accomplish a number of tasks. If I just sit down at my task and my desk and say, well, I'm going to work on my website this morning, that's not really productive. It's more effective to say, okay, Sarah, it's 10:00 now and you're going to work until 10:45 because I need from 10:45 to 11 to transition for an 11:00 meeting. So if I'm done with my website at 10:45, what does done actually look like? I've finalized the changes to the shop page. Now I know what that actually means. And it keeps me on track towards what it is that I'm going to accomplish.
So it sounds like we need to be as specific as possible with ourselves, with our students, with our family members, if they're neurodivergent or even if they're not, because a lot of times this does happen where parents ask their children, okay, so what are you doing now? English homework. like you said. But okay, and how long is that going to take? About 30 to 45 minutes, but there's no specifics of what English homework entails, like you had stated. How many questions is that? How involved is it? So it seems like, again, we go back to language, right? Using very specific language, but also breaking down tasks for ourselves and whoever's collaborating with us so that we can visualize using very specific language. So for example, in your case, working on your website, because I could think about it too, because this morning I had a situation where I was actually working on my podcast. What did that look like, right? Because I said, I'm going to spend 30 minutes in the early morning working on this. And then I had to actually backtrack. I didn't even know that I was using a strategy, but I guess I was. And I used a little bit of it, but I said, okay, I'm going to spend this half an hour because I have this half an hour break. And I'm going to work on writing the show notes for an episode that had just occurred and merging it together with a very specific trailer, creating those two things, just those two things, right? Okay. Now that I reflect on it with you, I'm thinking, wow, like that really saved me a lot of time because I've fallen into the trap that you've mentioned that so many of us fall into as adults also, where sometimes I do say, I'm going to work on this for X amount of time and then I'll be done and then on to the next thing. I've done it at work too. At work also.
Absolutely. Because if you're like me and a lot of our students, you could have sat down and said, I'm going to work on the podcast. I have a half hour to do that. And you were going to write your show notes. So maybe you went to write your show notes and saw a cool AI link. And now before you know it, you're down the rabbit hole looking at AI tools for integrating show notes and creating cool visuals. And a half hour's gone like that. And maybe you've explored some cool AI, but you don't have the show notes done and you haven't integrated it.
Right. And that's where the distractions come in, right? Because it's constant distractions. That's why this is so hard. Because again, I love the fact that my students are still using the phone for social because WhatsApp and there's Discord and it's interest-based. Like we love interest-based things because that's what is intrinsically motivating the social. But at the same time, there's distractions looming constantly. I'm curious your thoughts on this. So there is actually so many ways that, you could limit screen time and things like that. And one way, someone actually taught me this recently, that you can actually set a timer or a time limit rather on how much you're browsing. And it's a check on yourself actually to see, oh, wow, you're past your time limit. You spent an hour, let's say, on your screen time in the last, since this morning, and you can choose to ignore or you can continue. Do you have any thoughts on any of those boundary settings, or do you think that a lot of times people just overlook it and move on and just ignore? Because I click ignore usually.
I would say lots of individuals click ignore.
I'm not the only one, right? Okay.
Because it's just easy to do.
Yeah. Especially if you're in the middle of something, right?
Right. I do think that there are some helpful, useful tools and some approaches out there. So some helpful tools that I have found. One is a hardcore tool. And a lot of my young adults that are now in college or they're working a job and they really do need to be present and they just can't let that phone interfere. I love a device called Brick. Do you know Brick?
Never heard of it.
Oh, so Brick is really fascinating. It's a little square, like gray square that you have at your house. And before you leave your house, you have the Brick app on your phone. You tap this like square brick. And what it does is it absolutely 100% blocks your ability to go on to, let's say, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is that you've decided you don't want those notifications for. And you will not get any notifications, nor can you access it at work. So, and the thing is, when you leave your house, the only way you can get it back on is when you're back and you retap the brick. So it's hardcore because you can't, some of the blockers, you could just be like, okay, I give up. I want to, go back to what it is. And you can just take off the blocker. But it's in a different situation. It's in a different setting entirely. So that's a little bit hardcore, but I can tell you how many young adults I've worked with that have said it's been a lifesaver because they just can't get sucked into Instagram or whatever it is at work. So that's one thing. The second one that I really love is I love an app and a software called Freedom. Now, one of the reasons, do you know Freedom?
No, you're educating me. I don't know any of these apps, but whoever's listening, just free promotion, Brick and Freedom. Okay.
Yeah.
Freedom.
So Freedom, I really like for several specific reasons. One is that if I have let's say a site blocker on my computer, I can still go on the site on my phone, right? So I can still be distracted. So that's kind of like so-so. But what Freedom does is Freedom will block whatever sites you want on your computer and your phone at the same time. So So if I set a focus session, let's say I want to focus for 20 minutes, and I choose to control those sites on the computer as well as on my phone, then I can't go onto Amazon or Instagram or Discord or whatever it is on the computer, nor can I access it on my phone. So that's one reason why I like Freedom. The second reason why I really like Freedom is you can actually set up what are called sessions so that if you might need YouTube to do homework, but you don't want to use YouTube, say, during other times, you could you can choose where you're blocking it. The other thing that's fascinating is a lot of my students, if they use a Chrome extension, then they'll just leave Chrome and they'll go to Firefox, say browser, or they'll go to a different browser. They'll go to like DuckDuckGo. But Freedom controls the sites across all browsers, including DuckDuckGo.
Wow.
So it operates in the background, not in the browser. So that's really helpful for a lot of our students. So I like that. I think the other pretty cool, helpful tool for managing distractions for a lot of our students is the Chrome extension Unhook. Do you know Unhook?
No, I'm learning with you all these apps. I guess I don't have as many executive functioning challenges, or maybe I do, but I've never needed to use the app, but it could help so many of the people listening and probably me. Yeah.
Yeah. So Unhook is really helpful because typically when you go on YouTube, there's the video, but then alongside of it is all the
things that I want to listen to, things that they know me, they know us. Yeah.
There's that algorithm. What Unhook does is it blocks all the recommended videos. So when you go onto YouTube, you literally get a blank screen and you can type in what you want and it will pull up that video, but it will never pull up all the other recommended stuff.
Wow.
So it's great. I mean, and for our students who really get lost down the YouTube rabbit hole, I think that's incredibly useful.
Yeah, that is phenomenal because again, with algorithms and with so many of our students that have that specific interests, which help them in life, I don't want to take that away. I mean, they do great things with the interests. When they're busy doing other things, the YouTube rabbit hole of their interests are sitting literally right in front of them and they don't have to do anything but tap on it. So Unhooked, love it. Freedom.
One other thing about Freedom I have to mention that I like is Freedom also allows you to create a schedule. So you could go onto Freedom and say, I want to block access to Instagram from 6:30 to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. And that's really helpful because if my really hot spot for distraction is in the morning when I'm supposed to be getting ready for school or work.
Yeah.
That's where it will block it and you don't have to set it. It just automatically runs.
And then you could change it, I guess, based on when you're going to be structured and unstructured for some of our teens and tweens. Summer camp, for example, when they're not in school and they're less structured, maybe you could change the times on there for depending on your day.
Exactly. And it's super flexible. So for example, you could say, I want to block Instagram on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. It doesn't have to be like every week. You could choose the days, which is great because maybe on Tuesday morning, I don't have classes in college. So I want to go on Instagram. No problem.
Right. And of course, part of this is buy-in, right? I mean, of course, getting our students to buy into this and understand the rationale behind it with social thinking. Understanding the why is always the big thing of, well, I could just do all of it. This is my interest. Why are you blocking me from my interest? And that's where the social stories come in and all the other great work that we do for perspective taking and families. And speaking of families, they're a pivotal part of this storyline because they're the ones that are at home with their children that have, if I had a penny, and I'm sure if you had a penny, for every time I heard a parent say they just won't do their homework and then homework isn't delivered. And then they say, I found them and I tried everything. I put all these blockages on the phone and they're still on the phone at 3 a.m. And then they come into school on top of the already dysregulated child that has ADHD and autism. Now they're completely fatigued, tired, wiped out from being on the phone. And the parents are really just trying everything under the sun. So you've just given some good ideas of what they could do with the phone to block certain things. But my question is for the parents and who are trying to also support, as we're all collaborating together in an ideal world, every single one who is working with the child is collaborating. But when they're at home, is there something that the parents can even just do for themselves? Because the parents seem to be very overwhelmed, as well as these days we're moving like, I don't know, a mile a minute with everything because there's so many options, right, at our fingertips that maybe parents can do that can help also their children just by virtue of helping themselves with all of this?
Yeah, so I think there's several things. One is sort of sharing that theory of mind and perspective taking, where as a parent, you're describing what you see and asking your child to share if that's what they see. Do they see it as the same or different? So as opposed to saying, all right, as soon as we get home tonight, you need to do your homework and eat dinner and take a shower and get your homework done and be in bed by 10 o'clock. Well, as the adult, I'm the one that actually ran the movie through my head and saw how the time's going to go and to do that. And the thing is that it may be one of two ways that you can do this. One is to say, I see that when we get home at 4:30, that we will not be eating dinner until 5:30, and describe what you see that looks like. I see that would give you 20 minutes to shower. I could see, and you might even show that on a clock. I could see how it would give you another 20 minutes to chill out and relax. And then it would give you those 10 minutes to get the table set and help with making the salad. Do you see that time the same or different?
Mm-hmm.
So that you're getting a sense, or your other option is to say, if we get home at 4:30 and we're eating dinner at 5:30, what do you see yourself doing between 4:30 and 5:30? How do you see that time filling up? Because a lot of time kids don't picture how that time is going to fill up. It's just like, well, I'm getting home. And so really helping them to visualize that can make a great big difference. And of course, one of our favorite strategies is we love to take an analog clock and actually use a dry erase marker and shade the time on an analog clock, because it takes the invisibility of time and it absolutely makes it visible. Because if you say, I need you to feed the dog or whatever it is, some individuals are like, feed the dog, and their sense is like, that's going to take forever. But being able to shade, okay, this is a 2-minute task, or if I've asked you to take out the recycling and you anticipate that's like a 5-minute task, to shade on the clock that's 5 minutes, helping them to see that volume of time, like, oh, that's not that big of a deal, can be very helpful, so that you're on the same page with how you visualize time filling up. The second thing that I see, especially as we move into the upper ages with teens and young adults, and I have lots of parents who say, how am I supposed to do this for my kid? I have executive function challenges. I mean, I get this all the time, is that lots of young adults and adults, just like I was describing the man in New York City, don't actually visualize daily time. They have lived where they've been in a life where they have a schedule that has, say, digital time, like 2:00 tutor, 4:00 soccer practice, 7:00 homework, 10:00 bedtime.
In the Google Calendar. Yeah. Or whatever it may be. Or maybe not.
It might not even be Google Calendar. It might just be like a list, like a written schedule. 2 o'clock this, 4 o'clock this, 8 o'clock that, 10 o'clock that. The problem is that doesn't actually show you how the day or the time is going to fill up. So we love to use a schedule with 15-minute increments to really get a student to see, for example, okay, yes, my tutor is from 2 to 3 o'clock, but it takes us 15 minutes to drive there. And I need 15 minutes to get my notes for my SAT tutoring and stuff all together. Mom sometimes stays afterwards and talks to the tutor, and then it's another 15-minute drive home. And when you actually fill all that in, it goes from tutor at 2 to realizing I'm actually getting ready at 1:30, driving there, tutors 2 to 3, mom stays, we leave there at 3:15, drive home. I'm actually not home until 3:30. So it makes it realistic how time is going to fill up. And there's a huge benefit for students to seeing that, because it either allows them to see, I actually don't have a lot of time. I mean, I thought I had all afternoon, but now I really see, I have an hour, and how do I need to productively use that hour if I'm going to get stuff done? And the flip side of that is kids who are like, I don't have any time. Sometimes you show them, actually, you're getting home at 4 and you have nothing. Yeah. So all of a sudden I see this big open chunk of time like, I actually do have a lot of time to be able to do what it is that I want to do. So that even if I do 45 minutes of homework, I still have 5 hours and 30 minutes of me time. So really helping students to visually see schedule and how it realistically time fills up is very, very powerful.
Yeah. And I think that the 15-minute increment is so powerful because, again, it just nails down all the different components of what leads to that in terms of when it ends. And especially for our autistic teens and tweens and young adults who already are having trouble imagining the future and in making inferences about what's going to happen next, it can really help guide them for the day in terms of, this is going to happen and then that's going to happen. And maybe there's going to be an anxiety reduction ultimately. And like you said, there's going to still be time, even maybe later on, to go on that phone, if time allows for it. But yeah, breaking it down into 15 minutes, I feel like that's so powerful, just 15-minute increments that goes into that one task.
Sure, because here's a good example. I have students who will say, okay, I have a tutor or I'm meeting with you from 3 to 4, and I'm going to do homework from 4 to 5, and I have soccer from 5 to 6. Well, not really, because the reality is when you hang up with me, so even here's an example. When you and I hang up, I guarantee you are not going to be productive. You're going to need at least 15 minutes to shift gears.
Yes.
You're going to need to run to the bathroom, maybe get yourself something to drink, pet the cat, I don't know, whatever it is. Check your phone.
Yeah,
kind of
do something.
Get back in. Well, our students are the same way. And so even though you thought you were going to do homework from 3 to 4, you're really not. By the time you shift gears and you figure out what you have for homework and get all your stuff, you're likely not even starting homework until 3:20. And yes, soccer practice is at 4, but you're leaving the house at 4:15. So, and you're going to need a few minutes to get your stuff together for soccer practice. So really what you thought was homework from 3 to 4 is now really 3:20 to 3:40. And it makes it realistic that I have students where when they haven't contemplated this, then all of a sudden their sense is, well, oh my gosh, I don't have any time. What's the point? And then they just don't do the work instead of realistically planning for it.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot with the shutting down where it's like, I just can't do this. That's it. I'm done. But with these strategies of the visualization and knowing, wait, there is more time, but also not burning out by filling up everything. Because again, I've had students whose families, because parents also working collaboratively, have everything filled up till the end of the day. And I'm looking at this, and based on what you're saying, it doesn't really allow for any sleep, because what ends up happening is that, let's say you have soccer at 5, and then at 6 you're supposed to eat dinner, but at 7 you're supposed to do your homework, and then at 9 you're supposed to start getting ready for bed. But that also involves you checking on YouTube because that's your interest, and showering. And so then what ends up happening is that the day keeps going and never ends. And because time is viewed as, I feel like, sorry to interrupt, but even for me, I fall into this trap. I'm being honest. Sometimes time is viewed as just minutes that you spend on doing a task, but not all the components of the task. And then you think you have unlimited time.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I have students who will say to me, I don't want to write in a calendar. I hate a schedule because it never goes like that. They all want to be scheduled. And a lot of them will be like, I don't think about myself like that. I don't think about time like that. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And they really don't picture it. And it never does go that way. So they don't really understand the point of why they're doing it. And so I often try to make the connection that for some students, the calendar isn't about scheduling you. It's more about being able to see like puzzle pieces, how tasks are going to fit together so that you can do what it is that you want to do. So it's sort of figuring out, how do I put these pieces together so that I can find time to do the things that I really enjoy and to have some balanced life and to get things done. And so it's more of like a roadmap than a strict need to be doing this at this time.
Yeah. And that also lends itself to avoiding rigidity, which is what we preach, which is flexible thinking. There are going to be shades of gray within the schedule, always. I mean, from one minute to the next, things are always changing. There's no certainty on really pretty much anything. I mean, we have these appointment schedules, but we don't know. And then what happens when the doctor has an emergency? It just happened recently. I came to the appointment and the doctor wasn't there. And I said, what's going on? They had an emergency for something else. So it's just also a lot of unpredictability.
My favorite phrase is that shift happens, and all day long we shift. I thought I was going to have a doctor's appointment. Oh, shift. That didn't happen. I thought that the bus would be on time to take me to work today. Oh, shift. It didn't come at the time that I expected it to. I thought that proposal would take me 45 minutes. Shift. It's taking me an hour and a half. I mean, that's part of life. And so getting kids to recognize that shift happens and to be able to adjust and see that. One of my favorite things is when I have a schedule with 15-minute increments, I like to draw a line right down the middle, and I love to have my students do a plan A and a plan B. Plan A and compare what the two would look like side by side. That can be very helpful too.
That's so great because, again, in flexibility, it's always about shifting and pivoting, and that's what life is. I mean, it's not very common that the doctor won't be there, but there is a slight chance that the doctor won't be there because of something else. And so that's why having alternate plans of what could happen and visualizing, getting back to the visual, always visualizing it, closing your eyes, that's okay, right? Like almost like a mindfulness tool as you navigate through the steps. Is that an acceptable thing for yeah. I just wanted to switch gears. I know we've been chatting for a bunch, but just about now we have teens and tweens that are in their next chapter or heading to their next chapter, especially now we're in July, almost in August, actually, and they're preparing to go to college. In some cases, I know our seniors are, preparing to even maybe start employment or do something else that fits into their next chapter, their chapter 2 as they graduate their senior year. And with that comes this added layer of navigating a whole new set of executive functioning into adulthood. And many people that have been on this podcast that have different roles with these teens and tweens have stated that that transition period is really challenging. Part of the reason being that in many schools, we don't really have a transition system set up that's very specific and individualized, or even if there's a transition procedure at all. But I even have someone, as an example, if you could speak to how to assist in this, that still is missing deadlines, very bright, is going to go to a really good engineering program, but still is missing deadlines. He had actually an interview with MIT, which is really important. I mean, before he even picked his decision, but didn't even let anybody know and almost missed the interview, even though this was such a big part. And my gut instinct was telling me that just because I know him for a long time, that this was not intentional. It wasn't because he was scared. It was because he literally just forgot. And so now we're heading into going to college, and you're trying to prep your teens and tweens, whether they're your children or your students or a family member. And it seems as if they're just dropped there and now they have to regulate.
Yes.
What are there any thoughts that you have on that in terms of now they're in college? How do they could use a lot of these strategies. How can they regulate?
It is challenging because I think sometimes when I talk with families and kids are in high school, there's a sense of, oh, well, I don't want to make them do chores because they've got so much schoolwork to do or homework to do. But chores and workability is just part of life. So having kids learn to manage things like laundry and setting the table and chores and things, it's just important to begin teaching kind of at an early age. I mean, I think that's something that's important. I really do think that before students go off to school, it's critical to make sure that there is a healthy balance, but they also are benefiting and activating their tech tools to help them. So you've got to be teaching them how to use a Google Calendar, how to go on to, say, their school learning management system like Canva or Blackbaud or Schoology, whatever the school is using, and learn how to activate those assignments and integrate that school calendar with your own personal calendar. It's really about teaching them how to enter deadlines efficiently and tasks into something like Google Calendar so that it can integrate with their phone and they can get reminders. Learning how to even use AI to just get started with responding to emails. I mean, look, not that I want AI to take over the world, it is, but the reality is it can really get some of my students over that anxiety hump of responding to be able to make sure they're consistently checking emails and entering that. And the thing is that typical high schools don't teach the skill of using Google Calendar, of how to navigate email, of how to integrate assignments. They'll say, well, I gave them a schedule. But just because you have a school schedule that says what classes you have is not at all the same as a work schedule or a fluctuating school schedule with lots of chunks of open-ended time. So I guess what I would say is I think it is critical to identify a support person at college who can be teaching you some of those calendaring skills and teaching you to use and to make the technology work for you and with you, so that you are able to remember important things like I have an interview with MIT and how to do yourself with that.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because one of the things I've been learning a lot about is fostering this independence. And it's so hard sometimes because you want your child to be independent ultimately, but sometimes it's hard to kind of let them be independent, and because they're going to make mistakes and they may not carry through on some of these tasks. But it sounds like, based on what you're saying, that the earlier that we start letting them make these mistakes and work and collaborate on a plan to kind of get back on track, the more likely that they'll be ready for that next chapter because they've been doing it already before.
Absolutely. And comparing schedules, like just having a schedule of, okay, this is what the typical day looks like. How is today the same but different? I can't tell you how many times I have kids who will say to their parents, oh yeah, I have a job interview. I need a ride from school today. Then parents are going, well, you've got to give me more of a heads up. I can't leave work to be able to do that. And there's this sense of like, well, why? I mean, there's just this sense of, well, my adult will, jump in and manage it when it occurs to me that something needs to happen. And then all of a sudden you get to college and your roommate's not going to do that for you. Nope. And your professors aren't going to do that for you. And there is no adult around. So it is important to start to really be working with and talking with your teen or tween about, what does a schedule look like? Let's compare it to mine. What tools are you using to be able to stay on top of those things?
Yeah, and I like the way that you mentioned using AI as a support, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, because people speak about this all the time now, well, other people are using AI too, right? So if other people are going to use AI to schedule, then why can't you use AI to schedule, right? We can use it, everything, it sounds like, in moderation, obviously, but it seems like it really is helping to schedule people's tasks even. So
sure.
Why not?
Here's a really great example, although it's a little bit on the scary side, but definitely helpful.
AI always scares me.
Scary AI, but I have a lot of my college students, if the professor gives them a syllabi that has all of the dates and due dates and things written out, you can actually upload that to AI and ask it to read the deadlines and create a .csv file for you. And then you can import that into Google Calendar. And all of a sudden, instead of having to manually enter all of your deadlines, it will do it for you. Now, you might say, is that a cheat? Is that, thwarting the experience of pre-experiencing what are the deadlines and what's due? The reality is, I think the answer is no, it's not thwarting it, because if I have students who are not going to do it because it takes too much time and too much effort, I would much rather that they have those deadlines inserted in their calendar so that they're seeing them. And that's a great way to take advantage of time and get the task done and be effective and efficient and not miss a deadline.
Wow. Another practical on-demand strategy that anybody can use who's listening, whether you are neurodivergent yourself, not neurodivergent. This is applicable to everybody. I mean, can be used right now. And yeah, I mean, people are very scared of AI in general, just in terms of taking over. That's been the theme also on my podcast lately of just taking over jobs. And I get it. It's a scary time we're living in. But like you said, the words that you used, and I'm going to quote you on that, is shift, right? Shift. So we're shifting with the times. And in shifting with the times, we have supports and tools that can help our students, is the way I'm hearing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you've provided so many amazing practical strategies that can be used literally as we speak in the moment for anyone who's listening, and myself included, just very specific tools that anybody can use. And they're so thought out and so practical and so easy to do. Of course, people have to get into the pattern of using some of these things. But again, some of them are so simple, but yet people just don't think about. And so what's so beautiful about that is we may have not thought about it, but it's still so easy to do or to start doing. I have just one last question for you, if you have time. So sometimes people end up in a spiral, right? Where the executive functioning has gone wild. They're dealing with the autism and the ADHD, and the spiral is so bad that they just don't know how to get out of it. And of course, like any other meltdown, right? Sometimes I hear about letting them borrow your nervous system even for the moment, just because their nervous system is failing on them and not helping them. But when this executive functioning meets the social challenges and they're in the thick of this, is there any strategy that you can, or any even advice that you can give to the families or the children? Because sometimes it could last more than, a day or a week, where it's just really taking over their life, that can help them kind of just regulate a bit more.
And I think it's kind of that snowball system. I think, just like you said, let them borrow your nervous system. I think the buddy system has some value here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know your student really needs to get stuff done and they literally are so overwhelmed that they're just immobilized and they're not taking any action at all, doing tasks with and in some ways for a student, but having them go through the steps with you, and maybe even you get them started and they do a part of it, it actually feels good when that task is done. So if the room is a great big disaster and you just know there's no way it's not going to happen. No matter how much I ask and I say, clean your room, clean your room, clean your room, it's just not going to happen. It's too overwhelming. That student doesn't know where to get started. There's value in being that buddy and cleaning with and alongside the student, maybe even just one part, because when you get something done, it's kind of like, how you run errands on that Saturday morning and you're like, made it to Home Depot. Check it off the list.
I feel great. Feel like $1 million.
Yeah. There's something that feels so accomplished about that. A lot of our students aren't getting that dopamine hit from job well done, I did it. So by doing some of the things and getting it done and getting that feeling, you don't need to feel motivated to act. Oftentimes, acting brings about motivation. So getting students to start can often bring about that motivation. So I find if I have a student who's really shut down on a homework assignment and they're completely freaked out, I'm not even going to keep saying, well, what about this? And now you can do this and you need to do that. I might say, oh, okay, well, we know this is what done looks like. And an action step towards that is this. And I might get started and say, okay, and you finish this little part. And now this would be the next step. And I get them started. And then as soon as they get going on it, oftentimes they realize, oh, it's just not as bad as I thought. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of getting them to climb out of that hole a little bit by having some positive experiences of task completion. Because I think that success breeds success, and sometimes just taking action. I mean, like I'm sure you've had days where you've just procrastinated on doing something for your podcast for
Of
Emotional
course.
research.
Yeah.
But once you start, you find it just wasn't as bad as I thought. I was able to move through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are always moments where you feel even maybe I'm thinking about something in the future, right? And I'm nervous about it. Anxiety can be paralyzing, for example. And I'm like, wait, I can't do this right now. But I sit myself down, I start, and I say, oh, wait, things are working, things are grooving. But you make a really good point of they need to see for themselves in that moment that, okay, there's no pressure. I'm just starting. And it's that it almost like, it sounds like an anticipatory anxiety as it pertains to executive functioning. And then they're in it. And then slowly there's a calm that comes their way. I feel so calm right now after listening to all of this because I feel like these are so many great strategies. No, this is amazing. I mean, Sarah, what you have done for our community as SLPs, OTs, PTs, anybody who's working in the field, you have bridged the executive functioning piece and the speech and language pathology piece, and you've managed to masterfully just wrap it around together where all of it can be done at the same time. And I just can't thank you enough for having the ability to do that, for sharing that, for coming on my podcast. And I know that in the theme of executive functioning, going overtime with me. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's been a lot of fun. And definitely it's changing times and technology is changing executive function. So it's a good time to be chatting about it. And I thank you for the invite. It's a lot of fun.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sarah.